I'm Angela Yore.
And I'm Lynda Clarke, and welcome to Why We Lead, the podcast that delves into the stories and insights of impactful leaders
And unsung heroes shaping the fintech world and beyond. So, Laura, introduce yourself. Laura McCracken, who I've known for a long time now.
Well, yes, I'm Laura McCracken. I'm an American in London. That's the first question everyone asks you, right? So I have to just get that out there. Yes, I was born in Texas, but I've now been living here for 23 years, if you can believe that.
You're not. You don't want to go back.
No.
You love it.
No, especially if Donald Trump gets in, then I'm never going back.
I hear that.
No, I mean, this is my adopted home. So just to give you the quick background for me, I was born in Texas, raised in Alabama, military brat. So my dad was a helicopter pilot, and we lived on base for a long time. It was kind of like Top Gun, only for helicopters. So, so it's nice. Yeah, being in a town of 5,000 people, surrounded by 20,000 pilots, not bad. All between the ages of 24 and 25.
Yeah, as a teenage girl growing up.
Yeah, it was good. I started my first job was as a lifeguard.
Wow.
Yeah, on
That's
Army
different to
Aviation
payments.
Base. Yeah, it was the Officers Club. So that was a good place to start my career, yes. No, very different from where I am today. So I went from Alabama to Los Angeles, and then to New York, and then to London, then Singapore, then London, then Luxembourg, then London. And now I'm not leaving.
It's a draw. I hear this somewhere far away, then back to London, and then back again.
Yeah, that's right. So I think that London to me is a place I always dreamed of coming. I feel like it's the center of the world. And I feel like this is my dreams come true. As a little girl in Alabama, I dreamed of having an international career. And I didn't know how I was going to make it happen. So when I finally got to London, and then I managed to kind of bloom from there, I feel like I've arrived. Yeah. And so that's the geographical part. But also from the career standpoint, I started off in accounting, audit.
Did you? I didn't know that. I'm surprised.
Big mistake, I know. I know you told me you're going to ask me about my lows. I was thinking that was probably one of my biggest lows is when you graduate from university and you majored in accounting and you get your first job at KPMG and as an auditor, and you realize, I don't belong here.
It's not my tribe.
This is not me. It's not me.
Bringing in the wine.
Fantastic.
That sounds more right.
Perfect. That's me. At the end of the day, it's
right.
after. It is 5 o'clock, so it's not just 5 o'clock somewhere. It's 5 o'clock.
Maybe we should call this the wine podcast.
Wine with Angela and Lynda.
Yeah.
Sounds good. But yeah. So I majoring in accounting was probably not the best idea. It took me 10 years to get myself out of that. So I went from audit, then I went into investment banking. Then I finally didn't like investment banking either. It was too full of ego and arrogance, I gotta say. I enjoyed what I was learning, but it's just the people.
Yeah, it's quite hard, sort of.
It's a tough
Cutthroat
environment.
So growing up, what made you go into accounting in the first place?
Well, when you grew up in Enterprise, Alabama. Let me tell you how I went to Auburn University because my parents didn't have a lot of money. They could only afford to send me to a nice state school. So I went to Auburn. It's a good university. But I went there and I went to my guidance counselor and said, I want to be in international business.
I love that.
I want to major in international business. And she laughed at me. That's so funny, honey. There's no such thing as international business. Why don't you do something useful? Like, you can do accounting or nursing or, all those normal jobs that you can have. Or you can join the military or you can get married, the MRS degree. That's what most of us tried to get when we were in Alabama in university. So, no, I majored in accounting because it was just practical. And there were jobs out there. Back in the 90s, it's like there wasn't a great job market. So I heard you want to major in something that's going to be useful. And I don't regret it in that I learned the language of business. Right.
It's a good way to start, isn't it? It's the foundations, one of
It
the
is.
foundations of business.
To this day, I still trust I love hiring people who've had a background in audit because they see the big picture first and then they test I'm using my hands. I shouldn't do that in a podcast, but they look at the big picture first and then they test the hypotheses almost. And so I think I like that from a strategic standpoint in business. So I like people from an audit background, but I just don't want to do it. I respect it, but don't want to do the cash verification or the search for unrecorded liabilities.
Goodness, I know. You're just making me like
Sweat.
well, actually cringe at the minute because I'm going through something. I'm doing those kinds of things at the minute for a particular reason, but yeah.
Yes. But no, so I made my way to American Express. And the advice I give to young people is join a big company in the beginning because you can explore. So if you go into audit, you're stuck in audit. You go into investment banking and municipal bonds, you're stuck in municipal bonds. You go to American Express, actually, it opened up the world for me because I started off, I got my foot in the door.
Where were you? What were you in?
New York City.
New York.
So I went from LA to New York.
As well, yeah.
Yeah. So I went to New York, and my first job there, I got my foot in the door in the finance department, which again was miserable. But I managed to network my way out of finance into pricing, which is kind of a combination of finance and marketing and strategy, and then moved my way from there into Salesforce management, then moved from there into partnerships. And partnerships is probably where I started flourishing the most. That's when I figured out who I am, because I'm an ecosystem person like you are, Angela. It's like I love learning the landscape, getting to know different types. I was doing partnerships with the likes of British Airways and American Express on the co-branded card partnerships, or Costco and American Express. So really bringing together different industries into a long-term partnership was fun for me, and it was a global job as well. So I got to travel around the world. I had 25 countries.
And you were finally that global businesswoman.
Finally.
Arguably as well, one of the best companies in the world when it comes to affinity and loyalty and partnerships. Like I'm sure, having that base at a young age has set you up to who you are today.
Yeah. American Express is one of the most well-run companies. It's very strategically led. It's centrally led. They have a very, very strong core values that everyone, really follows, full of diversity. That's why again, moving from investment banking, just imagine going from investment banking, where we just kind of signed deals over the 3 martini lunch, to American Express, where it really flourished and thrived through diversity and really smart people. And we lived the values. That's when I really discovered what leadership was all about. Because leadership was 50% of the equation at American Express. It was kind of like you had your goals to grow the business, but you also had your leadership goals, and you got 2 different ratings, 50-50. So you'd get like a G rating and an L rating.
Yeah.
And if your G rating was excellent, you were a 1 on G, and you were a 4 on L, they would fire you because that's just not good enough. They don't want to have bad leaders, or they put you into an individual contributor role. But you're not going to be able to be a leader if you're not a good leader at a company like American Express. So that's where I learned all of my leadership skills.
So there was something really interesting you said to me that's not, and this is no offense to any accountants listening, but not typical kind of audit or accounts, is the networking out of it. I've not heard that before, but you networked your way out. So that kind of tells me a little bit about you and kind of the proactiveness and the way you wanted to grow through your career, and particularly that you had those aspirations from a young age. What do you think created that in you? Why are you a leader? How did, what was that path that kind of created that in you? Because not everyone does.
Well, I've always been a leader from the beginning. So since I was like 10 years old, I was organizing stuff and pulling together people. And then one thing, the best compliment I ever received from anybody is that you bring out the best in people. And I really do. That gives me purpose. So if your purpose is coming from people, bringing people together, helping people to grow, helping them to shine, and then, you shine as a result, right? So to me, that's what leadership has always been all about. I've I wanted to be a leader when I was. I'm smiling because I remember when I was like 10 years old, my dream was to be president of the United States. And then I decided, well, that's a really
You're
bad
living
job.
in the wrong country now.
I know. But now I still got, I meant, Boris Johnson was an American and he made prime minister. So it's possible.
You still said that you've told me.
I'm still interested.
You're still interested in politics, going down that politics route, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm still a young girl. So it's a long way to go. But I always wanted to be, I realized that being president was hard, but I then thought Secretary of State, and that's what got me into my global. I was like, that's even more global. Be Secretary of State, travel around the world. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe, it was kind of tough to jump straight into that from, Enterprise, Alabama. So that's when I kind of got into my global financial services career and got into payments by accident. But
and you can't get out of it.
But
now,
I found, every time I try and get out, they pull me back in. Yeah.
And you've had some really big jobs, haven't you? Working with some of the biggest brands in the world. What do you think you've learned from that?
Well, yeah, walking you through the brands. I mean, again, American Express was like the formative years, 10 years at American Express. And I went to Citibank in Asia. And while I like Citibank, it was a challenging change in terms of culture, which was probably a little bit of a failure for me, because when you've been in one company for 10 years and you go to another one that has very different values and ways of doing things, I failed. I didn't do as well there as I'd done at American Express. Then I went on I did headhunting for about 6 years in the payments industry. So I got to that. It was a great way to build your network.
Definitely.
And you mentioned network earlier. That definitely is a recurring theme throughout my career. I love networking. But I enjoyed getting to know people. But then I realized I jumped off that career ladder too early during the 6 years of headhunting. And every time I would sit across the table from somebody, I would think, I could do that job. So I decided to get back in. So I went to Amazon. And Amazon was an amazing company. Gosh, Amazon is so professionally run. There's nowhere to hide at Amazon. You have to do a good job or you're out of there. But I learned a lot. A great innovative company. Again, great values. I found that people who did well at American Express also did well at Amazon. Then I went on to Facebook, which was an adventure, a roller coaster, because I joined Facebook right after the Cambridge Analytica scandal.
Yep.
So my first day of Facebook was sitting in a conference room in Menlo Park with a lot of other Facebook employees watching our CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, testify in front of the Senate. So it was a really interesting day to start the job, right? And then from there, I went to Wirecard.
Oh, yeah. Well,
we can come back to that.
We've got to hear about that. We've got to hear about that.
Yeah, it was a real step change in my career, and that I got an amazing role there. But yes, the bottom kind of fell out. We can go back to that. And then Accenture. Accenture was Accenture's been an amazing experience because it kind of pulled everything together. Being in a large global consulting firm, and my responsibility, I was the MD of global social commerce. I was really partnering payments with commerce in a platform environment, working with those companies like Amazon, Alibaba, Facebook, or Meta now. I still go back to my Facebook days. It's still Facebook to me, but Meta. Working with all those types of companies to really light up social commerce, but it brought everything together for me. And
You've certainly seen every side of not just the payments chain, but the chain, the end-to-end chain, haven't you? Like I see when we're in meetings, the perspective is a slightly different perspective that you've got on things because of that.
Yeah, it's helpful. I mean, I think that, and one of the things that I see happening in our industry is convergence. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was doing at Accenture, is thinking about how do you bring together financial services and big tech and commerce all under one umbrella. You almost think about the super app concept. So people think about that idea very skeptically, but things are all converging. So it's good to have kind of worked in both social media, marketplaces, and financial services, and then the strategy consulting.
What are your biggest learnings from those? So I guess when have things gone really bad that have helped you learn? Because you talked about some of your roles you just didn't succeed in, and others you've flown high.
Well, let's see, starting at the beginning. Well, let's go to the biggest one, the elephant in the room, which is Wirecard. I was at Meta at the time, Facebook, and it was a great job in that I was doing some strategic stuff. I was developing kind of P2P payments via WhatsApp. I was lighting up social commerce on the suite of apps, like Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Messenger. It was fun. It was a great environment, but I wasn't a leader. I didn't have, because I joined when I did, we just didn't get the budget. I didn't get to hire people, and I was not happy for that reason. So then I got this offer to join Wirecard, and it was a big job. It was one of 4 EVPs reporting directly to Jan Masalek, who was my boss at the time, who's out, who knows where he is right now. We hear he's somewhere in Russia.
Is that the rumor?
That's the rumor. Yeah. But it was a big job, and the mandate was really exciting. My job was to run this fintech and financial services vertical around the world. We had just bought Citibank's prepaid portfolio. We had given birth to the likes of N26, Monzo, Revolut, Curve. We'd really helped them by giving them, letting them use our financial services licenses around the world, and letting them leverage our issuing and our acquiring capabilities to give them life. And I thought, this is exciting. So on top of that, I was going to build an accelerator company, an accelerator platform.
And how long were you there before?
Well, before the bottom dropped out, about 7 months.
Gosh.
So,
and you had no idea, because we've spoken about this before, had you? You didn't see, what were the signals?
Yes and no. So just to tell you how this went down. So I was called by Spencer Stewart saying, like, hey, would you be interested in this job with Wirecard? But we want to let you know there are some real negative press out there, but we believe it's isolated to Asia. And good news is, Jan Masalek is going out to solve the problem. He's going to be taking over Asia. So they're going to get this thing under control. And what we need some people like yourself to bring in more process into the company, because the company's grown really quickly. It has probably, it's like a teenager who's grown up too fast and doesn't have kind of the process in place to really manage it properly. So we want to bring in some people from outside.
And that's right up your street, right?
It sounds exciting. Yeah, I loved it. I thought, this is, first of all, it's a great opportunity, and it's a company that, I came from a blue chip background with American Express and Amazon and Meta and KPMG, et cetera. And so to bring that to a fintech, and they took a lot of pride in that they were the fintech of Europe. They were the PayPal of Europe. They took huge, and the employees were very prideful. So I was looking forward to joining that. I did it, and my first sign. So my first 3 months on the job, you always try and do your 100-day plan. I came in all guns a-blazing and got my arms around the business around the world, built a strategy during that first 100 days. But I noticed a few things, and I spoke with the guy who was on the supervisory board. I won't name him name, but he was on the supervisory board, and I talked to him. I said, listen, it's after 3 months. I said, I have, noticed some challenges in the business. Our org structure makes no sense. We need a proper COO. I mean, I love Jan Masalek. He's a great guy, a lot of fun, but he's more of a partnerships or a chief revenue officer. He's like a deal maker. He's not a chief operating officer. And I told Jan that as well, so he knows. I said, you're not a chief operating officer. We need someone to put process in place. So I mentioned that. I also said we don't have a CRM system. So everyone's, client lists are on Excel spreadsheets. We need a proper CRM system. Third, we don't have values on the wall. Our values are about revenue growth, and that drives the wrong behaviors. We don't have the right incentive systems. Again, incentives are all about revenues. So I just named all these things, and then he came back and he said, you know what? I think you're going to be really happy with what we're going to be doing next year. We're going to be implementing a lot of the changes you have laid out. And also, we're bringing in KPMG to do an audit to really find, help to exonerate the company from these allegations of, its propriety. So we're going to be doing all of that. And I said, that's fantastic. And that was in December of 2019. So I started watching and paying attention, trying to see what's going on. I did notice something in April. I noticed that there were some acquisitions happening that I was kind of kept out of, that I should have been in the loop, but I wasn't. So I found out after the fact that there had been a big acquisition in Africa and I thought, that's really odd that it should have been in my backyard, because I would have been involved in this, and it wasn't mentioned. So that was the first warning sign I had. And that was like in March or April of 2020.
It was June when it all.
Well, it all fell apart in June.
Yeah, June. That was
yeah. That was because we got the KPMG came back with their audit, and they said we are not able to verify these revenues. Basically, half of our revenues were apparently invented.
Well, so for any of our listeners who don't, are not familiar with the Wirecard case, maybe new to payments or, going on their leadership journey, just walk us through what actually happened.
So Wirecard, this is what I think happened. I don't know anything for sure, but I think what happened, Wirecard was launched some 20 years ago. It started off as just a payments company, and it got its beginning in gaming, as a lot of good payments companies do. But it tried to diversify, and gaming I think it was around the time of George W. Bush was in office, and George W. made online gaming illegal in the U.S.
Yeah.
And most of these companies kind of went under, except for Wirecard. Wirecard continued to grow. That was amazing. So everyone was thinking, wow, it's amazing. But they did have other lines of business. They had an airline business. They grew into airlines. They grew into retail and into financial services, like I said. So we had those 4 verticals. So the company was growing in payments, and it had both issuing and acquiring. And it used its licenses as a platform, like I said, to really give birth to some really good names in the business. So it had a real side of the business. But what happened, I think, is that when the business started dropping on the gaming side, they didn't want the revenues to drop. So they decided to invent some clients and then started faking some invoices and revenues and deals.
I wonder if they dug a hole.
I think they probably thought they could grow their way out of it.
Yeah.
It's a temporary thing.
Yeah.
Got above them.
So yeah, so we should almost have a podcast just on Wirecard.
I know we will. Let's get back to you, Lynda. To you, I know Lynda, you're looking like you've got a burning question there.
And just more how you felt when that all came out. You invest so much of yourself into roles when you're in that position, and you've obviously sat there and really analysed and saw a lot of opportunity of how you could change and create things. When that landed, what did you feel? How did you manage that?
It was a huge disappointment, because I had really put my name on the line. I remember being on the phone with Visa and MasterCard and telling them that, the report from KPMG is coming out in 3 or 4 weeks. I hope that it has some really good news for us. But really believing that this was going to be an isolated incident, that it was purely something that happened in Asia, and that we were going to be vindicated and we're going to be moving forward. So the level of disappointment, is just off the charts. And the level of the awareness that suddenly hit me about, the people who had pensions that were, tied up. People lost their entire pensions.
It's really sad.
Through their investments in Wirecard. These employees, I'd only been there for 6 or 8 months at that point, so I wasn't as devastated, but they'd been there for 20 years. And some employees
hadn't got a clue.
They just couldn't believe that this was the case. So watching their devastation, kind of rubs off on you. So really it's about the looking at the investors and the employees are what hurt me the most. And then also some of my partners. I had to be on the phone all the time with my fintechs who were relying upon us, and they had to scramble to try and very quickly get their own e-money license or figure out how to get payments done. We had over 5 million prepaid cards around Europe. So it was just a crazy time. But you know what? It wasn't, for me, I was lucky because I was so new. I was asked by the new acting CEO to take on like 9 board roles. And they said, listen, Laura, can you help us? We need to do some investigation. We need to figure this stuff out. We need someone who's been around long enough, but not been around too long, who can have an objective view of the business. So at first, it was a challenging thing to decide to do because it was a lot of danger and risk in taking on these roles. But I did take on these roles. I ended up being chairman of a couple of companies, and having to, my first line of business was to fire my old boss. He wasn't there. But I had to, as chairman of the company, take him off of the board of directors. And I had to investigate people across the company. I had to talk to the regulators. I had to work with police authorities. I dealt with, office raids. I was dealing with customers, clients, potential investors, selling off parts of the company, figuring out what parts of the company were good, were not good. So it was probably one of the most, even though it was a hard time, it was one of the most exciting times of my career. And I learned more in the 4 or 5 months as chairman of those companies than I would have ever learned if I'd been chairman of a succeeding business. This is a business in crisis, and a business where I had to actually, sell parts of the business, figure out, are we going to go bankrupt? Is it a going concern? All the subsidiaries. Just to let you know, Wirecard was made up of probably over 100 subsidiaries.
Goodness.
So when I was put on the boards of these companies, they were subsidiaries. Some of them were still profitable.
Yeah, good companies.
Yeah, so you could sell them. Some of them were not. Some of them had to go into bankruptcy. That's a hard decision to make. And if you get it wrong, you can go to jail as a board member. You cannot trade while insolvent.
So what did you learn about leadership? You got in the arena, didn't you?
Well, it was tough. I mean, in that case, here I am coming in, being parachuted in as a chairman of a company. So imagine you are the managing director of this company. You've been doing this for 20 years. I come in as the chairman. I've been around for 2 minutes, and then I'm questioning you and asking you questions like, so what is this transaction about? And why didn't you do that? That was a tough job. So that was probably the hardest part. I think that I had to be as diplomatic as I could be. When you bring people into the biz, when you bring people back who've been suspended, it's not easy. And when you fire people, it's not easy. But yeah, you get through it. And I think as long as you follow your core, I've had people actually reach out to me after that fact and say, you know what, Laura, you did well. Thank you. I mean, I know you had integrity in the process, but it was a hard time, because people were losing their jobs. It's not easy. But I do feel like I have core values that I stick to, no matter what's going on around me. I think it's if you imagine the sailing analogy and you've got a keel on the boat that keeps you steady, as long as you've got a really strong core and you can kind of withstand the pressures, and just act in accordance with your own values. And that people, they might be angry with you today if you're having to lay them off or ask them questions that might be challenging or difficult. They'll forgive you in the future because they know. Eventually they read the news, they realize this is it's crazy circumstances.
Yeah, for sure. So you talked about your strong core being part of kind of what kept you resilient and kind of stable through that part. Did you have any other kind of mentors or peers? Because that's a really difficult time where I guess you probably didn't have, it's not like you had a CEO or someone to talk to. Were you able to kind of get mentors? How did you kind of navigate your way through that? I'm guessing your audit background probably helped you a bit there.
It helped, and lawyers helped as well, because we did have a good law firm that was helping us throughout all the entire process, and I consulted with them frequently. Honestly, having strong values, having a good core will get you through anything. And I didn't have any mentors, honestly. to be honest, most people said, don't do it. Don't get involved. But I said, but somebody has to. Somebody has to. And I have to get some credit from the regulators for actually stepping up and trying to fix the problem. Because otherwise, who else is going to do it?
It would have been left with someone with no knowledge.
Somebody's got to do it. And I guess at the end of the day, we ended up selling the intellectual property and the employees to Santander. So they took those. They didn't take any clients, but they took a lot of employees. The ones that we selected that were the best of the breed, and we took some of the intellectual property because there was good tech there, and we sold that to Santander, and we sold parts of the business to different entities. So again, it was a great learning experience. No, I wish I had a good mentor, to be honest. But this doesn't happen every day, does it?
Well,
there's no rule book.
Yeah, exactly. Who's going to mentor you? There's probably a few people in the world that have had that experience.
But again, your values. If you always come back to values, you're going to be fine.
Well, last question then. What do you think? It's going away from Wirecard, but we're in fintech, we're in payments, and this is a podcast. It's for fintech leaders and aspiring leaders. What is it that what makes a good leader in fintech? Is there anything specific about fintech and leadership? I know leadership is a general broad term.
Partnerships. My one word answer is partnerships.
Yeah.
Because fintechs have to play within the ecosystem. There are a lot of moving parts. There are big banks, there are regulators, there are big tech coming in. You've got to be able to identify the field, understand who the players are, and figure out how you can fit within that circle. I think to be a good leader in fintech, you've got to be able to both see the field and tell the story. So figure out what's your story. How do you fit within this ecosystem? What problem are you solving? How are you partnering with other people in that ecosystem? So that's going to be the most important thing to succeed, I believe, in fintech. And then the other traditional leadership traits come into play as you build up the team, hire and develop the best, and create the right goals and metrics and measures to drive it forward.
I have one last question too. Just because I had a very similar circumstance with a teacher once, but if you could go back to that guidance counsellor and talk to her now about your dream, what would you say to her?
I would say, don't quash people's dreams. I mean, come on, give me some hope. It took me 10 years to get into where I wanted to be, from that little girl in Alabama, who wanted to have that global career. It took me 10 years. Imagine if I'd had it, maybe she could have advised me differently. But yeah, I should go back to her and find her and say, it does exist.
Yeah.
It does exist.
Look at me now. Perfect. Thank you very much.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Good to talk to you.
Yeah.